Hello there, everybody, and welcome to Things We Said Today, our virtual roundtable where we discuss all things related to the Beatles, both as a group and in their solo careers, their history, their present, and their future. In fact, we're waiting for news about their future that you may know by the time this airs. I'm Al Sussman from Beatle Fan Magazine, and I'm here with my three co-hosts. First of all, the host of the syndicated Beatles radio show Every Little Thing, and that's Ken Michaels. Hey, Ken.
Hey, Al. How's it going?
Good. How about you?
Very good.
Good. And our resident musicologist and longtime classical music reviewer for the New York Times, still does classical music reviews up in his new domain in Portland, Maine. And that's Alan Kozin. Hey, Alan.
Hello, Al. How you doing? And hello, everyone.
And last but certainly not least, as Alan calls him, the world's only remaining full-time Beatles journalist. And he writes for freelance work for Billboard magazine and for AXS.com, axes.com. And that's Steve Marinucci. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Al. Hello, everyone.
Now, we're going to be discussing the huge package that just came out within the last 10 days of Paul McCartney's Flowers in the Dirt album. The latest installment in his archive collection. But first, we have a couple of news items, and as so often seems to be the case, they're unhappy ones. And I'll let Steve take that.
The first one is something that I got to cover on Billboard the other day. It's the passing of Rosie Hamlin, the lead singer of the group Rosie in the originals, and the reason that is even being mentioned here is because of the fact that the song that she did, Angel Baby, was a big favorite of John Lennon's. And in fact, for the story, I got a hold of May Pang, and she told about how she and John both loved the song, and it was that discussion that kind of led to him doing the song. And it wasn't released on the rock and roll album, but it was released later on the Men Love Avenue album. But John loved the song, and he actually does kind of a spoken introduction where he says, "This is one of my favorite songs." You can barely hear it over the introduction, but he talks in there. So
wasn't it on Roots?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was on Roots too, but yeah. I mean that wasn't. But in terms of commercial albums, which I guess you can call Roots commercial, but
yeah, it was gray market. Let's put it that way.
Gray market. Yeah, but anyway. But
and
yeah,
also when the rock and roll album was reissued in the 2000s, it was one of the bonus tracks.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And it is, and even without John Lennon's admiration for the song, it was one of the classic songs of the 50s. One of the, if there's, I guess, a one-hit wonder definition, I guess it's kind of you'd have to give it to Rosie in the originals.
Although it has one of the worst sax solos ever committed to record. It's awful.
They, according to the story that she told, they did it in an airplane hangar. Mm-hmm. So it was really done under not so great conditions.
Sure. Well, in those days, a lot of records were made under less than great conditions.
Right. Mm-hmm. So,
and anyway, John brought up the song on WNEW when Scott Muni interviewed him.
That's right.
And he just told Scott, "I love that song. I love it." And I think Scott was surprised that he liked it.
Mm-hmm. 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 Anyway, the main subject at hand is this gigantic box that I have in front of me. Mm-hmm. It called Flowers in the Dirt. It's the latest in the Paul McCartney archive collection, and we're going to go through the entire box and give our thoughts on each of the elements. We probably should start with the main album, right?
Why don't we start with the box itself first? Should we do that?
We could.
Why don't we start? Yeah, I would say let's start with the box itself, because it's an interesting. I mean, we've seen the other boxes, and in terms of what the box contains besides the CDs, there's some nice stuff in here.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since people have been complaining, for a couple of months since it was announced that I don't want to pay all that money for a book, I mean, there's the stuff in here really is exceptional, and it's, it's called a deluxe box. It's, you
for
kind
a
of,
reason.
Yeah, you kind of expect something extra, and I think that the stuff he's come up with, to give us as the extras in this, or I mean, I buy books too, so maybe it's not as much of an issue for me, but really good stuff. Where should we start even?
Well, like for instance, the Flowers in the Dirt and this one photo books are, they're very interesting. Mm-hmm. They're pretty to look at, but actually the core items are really the book that has a reproduction of Paul's composing notebook, very similar to what Bruce Springsteen did for his Darkness on the Edge of Town box set, and then of course the main Flowers in the Dirt book, which has not only a treasure trove of photos, a lot of which I've never seen, but also an essay by Dylan Jones and much interview material, especially regarding the McCartney and the McCartney-Costello collaborations. So, Alan, what are your thoughts?
Well, and this book is 113 pages, not counting the covers, and well, I don't know. Some of these people count them, and it's really got lots of, as you say, photos and info. I was really taken also with the sort of notebook, what he calls it. Rough book, where he's got the lyrics, and and we've seen McCartney's handwritten and sort of adorned with drawings lyrics, over the years. But if you're really interested in these songs, these things really offer all sorts of possibilities for study of, I mean, apart from things where words are crossed out and new words are written in, which is, I always love to see that.
Me too.
Yeah, and he's got, where there's a bridge, drawn in a picture of a bridge on some of them, and some of his caricatures and things like that. But also, I mean, just for me, the stuff that's crossed out and moved around, and arrows pointing where this verse now is going to go, and that's all fascinating stuff. I mean, I just love seeing manuscripts. I don't know if listeners might remember, but there was once a Monty Python book where it had manuscripts from Shakespeare and the great poets, and you'd see Shakespeare like writing saying eeny meeny miny mo, and it's crossed out and it says shall I compare thee to a summer's day written over. But and so but this is like that, but a little more serious, and he's got the chords written in, stuff like that, and so there's that. Then the this one book, I think, I mean, they've made an effort here. This one had 2 promos, which are included on the DVD. And so you have a book that opens both ways, 2 different ways. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like the connection is almost like an accordion kind of thing, where you look at the book from one direction, and it's the sort of Indian kind of promo of this one, and the other one is the more modern psychedelic promo of this one with
I wonder if that caused somebody to have nightmares when Paul said, yeah, why don't we open the book 2 different ways?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then the Flowers in the Dirt photos, your paintings, I guess they're Linda's photos of
I love those.
They're quite nice, and they've done the box that way too, which is the first time they've you look at all the boxes on the shelf. They're so one's blue, one's red, but mostly they're plain boxes with the photo of the cover on the front. This one has the flowers in the dirt photo sort of all around it, so that it stands out on the shelf, very colorfully. I just think the whole thing is beautifully done. So.
It really is.
That whole process is called Chibachrome. Is it Chibachrome or Cibachrome? What they use for the front cover? Those flowers?
Don't know.
Yeah, they do describe it, and they explain the whole process. I think it's pronounced. It's either Chibachrome or Cibachrome.
It's Cibachrome. I'm looking at the back of the. It's in the back of the book.
Yeah,
and it's Cibachrome.
Oh right, yeah. And the book is of an exhibition of these that took place in 1989 at the Mayer Gallery. I guess it must be in London. But yeah.
And it also serves to show, as Paul has done many times, Linda's work as an artist. He's, as a photographer and an artist, that he's something. It's something that he's always been. He's done several exhibits and things and put out books and stuff, and he continues to honor her that way. So that's cool too.
I think the reason why the books are so important for Paul to put into all these box sets is because it is his own way of keeping Linda's legacy alive and making the public aware of her fine photography. So there's so many photos through the years. Imagine all the archives of what he has that we've never seen before. Yeah. And this is really probably just a small sampling of it. So think about all the work going through all the photos and picking which ones deserve to be put into these books. Yeah. So...
if I were getting a deluxe edition that was just the recordings, it would be okay. But this makes these productions, I think, really special. And and you could buy the stripped down edition with. I wish there was a middle way so that people who really, really don't want the books for whatever reason could get all of the discs. The only way you can get all of the discs is in the set with all the books. But that's what it is.
Yeah. Ken, did you get much of a chance to dig into the main book, the Flowers in the Dirt book?
Yeah, in fact, I just finished reading it, and I really love it. Mainly because of the fact that almost all the parties involved with the album are quoted here. You not only have Paul and Elvis, but you have some of the musicians. I know there's a few quotes from Hamish Stewart and Robbie McIntosh. And Chris Whitten. I don't believe there's anything from Wicks in there. He must be the quiet one in this band.
Since that's the one he's still working with, you would think that he had access.
Yeah,
really.
But also the different producers and their own angles of what it was like to work with Paul. I think it's very well rounded there. And towards the end of the book, Paul also puts in the articles that appeared in Club Sandwich, which was, through the fan club, 4 times a year you would get issues of their newsletter. So you not only get quotes from Paul today talking about it, but it's also interesting to hear what was said back then. Yeah. So I like it from that angle. There's a lot of things that I found interesting in that book. In particular, Elvis Costello says that Paul may not remember this, but about 12 or 13 years ago, he was contemplating releasing the demos as an album. He actually says this in the book.
Elvis was, or Paul?
Elvis said that Paul was considering.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And the engineer, I think it's Neil Dorfman, it's Mitchell Froome's engineer, had said that Paul had handed him some DAT tapes of some 30 unreleased songs that were very good, that I guess weren't used on Flowers in the Dirt. So, love to hear those. But maybe they ended up on Off the Ground. Who knows?
Alan, to respond to one thing that Alan said, Alan, you can get the 2-disc special edition in MP3.
Just the 2-disc.
Right.
Yeah, but you can't get all 4. You can't get, in other words, the I think you just get the demos, but not the studio production.
Right.
Elvis Costello things. Yeah. I also wanted to point out, that web magazine Super Deluxe Edition. Has everyone seen that? They have a huge article about Flowers that also interviews all the producers.
Right.
And it's currently up, and I think it's that's something I think we should point out to everyone.
People also did a good 2 articles, one interviewing McCartney and Elvis, and the other going through all the songs that they did together, which is also a good, also something that people should look up and make note of.
Yeah, Jeff Slate did an interview with Elvis Costello.
Right.
Where he talked about the songs that the two of them wrote together. And in fact, if anyone's interested, on my website, I have a page called Important Links, and I posted the links for all these different articles on Flowers in the Dirt, and they're all in there.
And I think an expanded version of Jeff Slate's is coming out in Beatle Fan, right, Mr. Executive Editor?
Yes. Yes. Actually, the man above me has made that decision, and it will be in the next issue. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And also, I just want to say that, and I've said this before, I am a real sucker for handwritten lyrics. I think that the fact that Paul shares these with us, the fact that he saves them, I love the fact that he does that. And it just looks like he just handed it to you after you wrote it. And in fact, some of them were written in pencil, and you can tell because they're so lightly written. And some of the pages even have a stain on them.
Right.
And there's even a letter that Elvis wrote to Paul in the back there that was shortly after they had started writing together, just, kind of thanking him for working together. He's looking forward to doing more, that kind of thing. But just the fact that's all, you feel like you're sharing, some privacy here of what happened early on. So I just love, like Alan said, I love looking at the handwritten lyrics, what gets crossed out, or also lyrics that were written down here that weren't used. I love that kind of stuff. And between that and recently, looking at the new I Me Mine book with George's handwritten lyrics, and all that we went through with John's handwritten lyrics that were in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, some of which have been reproduced in the
Hunter Davies.
Yeah, and the reissues on CD in the 2000s. There was a few songs, I think, that had handwritten lyrics from John. I love that stuff. I eat it all up. And anytime that there's any lyrics in there that weren't in the final version, I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
So.
Very true. Steve, any other thoughts on the what you might call the paper material?
On the paper material? No, not really. I mean, like I said, that it's funny that they did that one book kind of have backwards and forwards. You can just kind of see somebody going, no, not that, But I mean, there is some beautiful stuff in there. I agree that the notebook is really fascinating to go through. The one that caught and also the purple book, which is the main book, but the one that really caught my attention was the Linda photos, the cover photos. That is just really nice. You really miss Linda a lot when you start thinking about how talented she was and looking at that, that just kind of brings it all out. So I think that's a really cool part of that paper material. But I mean, as we've said, there's a lot in there to really like. So.
That kind of reminds me, I kind of wish that in the actual Flowers in the Dirt book with the text in it, that there would have been one or two quotes from Linda to represent her, but there weren't.
I guess maybe the feeling is that the photos are really, kind of representing her voice.
Well, isn't she? And I can't remember now because I looked at it a couple of times. Isn't she in the documentary? Isn't she put it there? So, I mean, doesn't she say a few things?
I don't think she has any...
she doesn't talk.
No, she doesn't have any comments, just the video that was done in the studio, her with the band.
Right.
And she may have, just said a couple of things, but nothing, sort of on camera.
See, I remember it when they're shooting. I think, isn't it this one? She tells Hamish to flap his wings a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's one part, but I mean, yeah, it's just too bad that she actually didn't comment at all. But that's a nice tribute that she's in there. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, we probably then should get on with the music. And why don't we start with the main disc?
Okay.
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 All right. And I'll dive in first.
All right.
Because I did a infamously bad review of Flowers in the Dirt back in 1989. So bad that Bill King ended up having to do a counterpoint positive review. Now I've walked back on this a couple of times in the years since, both in Beatle Fan and also on the Something New blog site. But I've really have not listened to this album in quite some time actually, and Ken hates this when I do this, but I'm going to say that this album has aged very, very well. Music is capable. Help me out here, Mr. Cozen. Music is capable of aging well,
that's for sure.
Not so well.
Well, it hadn't for a long time. It was looked down upon.
Was it?
It really went through. I thought it was. It really had there was not a lot of appreciation for it for a long. The way things go in I wouldn't say recent years after, but it seemed like there was a long time where people really didn't think that much of it.
Interesting.
And I mean,
I seem to remember people liking it. But it was the first of his records that I reviewed for the Times, because it was like shortly after the Times Beatles desk got established, and we were actually trying to do an interview with him about it instead of a review, and it was getting so hard to pin him down through his publicist that we finally just said, let's just review the record, and I really liked it. I mean, I thought it had, all these, it had kind of a running theme, about marriage and children and, and parents. I mean, put it there. I mean, it just had all of these connections that seemed to hang together really well. There were things I didn't like about some of it. I mean, not that crazy about Rough Ride, not even that crazy about Figure of Eight as a song. And I think I've said several times what I think of Oulé Le Soleil.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, So, but I don't want to interrupt. Al was still doing his.
That's okay.
From what I recall, when the album came out, it got mainly positive reviews. Mm-hmm. I don't remember it getting bashed.
Well, except for Al.
Except for me.
Was this worse than Somewhere in England?
Yes.
What was it that you disliked about it, Al?
I basically sloughed it off as being pleasant. That it didn't really have much to it. I think I particularly pointed at Distractions as a track that, was just pleasant. And actually, that's one of the tracks that has, at least to me, has kind of aged best. It's it's a lovely song, and just overall, especially in stark contrast to its immediate predecessor, Press to Play, which just screams 80s. Right. This album, as I said, I feel has aged extremely well. Obviously, the core of it is the four McCartney-Costello collaborations, but also you've got Distractions, and you've got We Got Married, which is used for the one tour as instead of Let Me Roll It as kind of the big arena rock climax of the first set before Paul would sit down at the piano. How Many People is a wonderful song, especially these days when reggae is so prevalent even in top 40 land, and obviously things like this one and Put It There, which are kind of standard pieces in the McCartney catalog. So I think just overall, I think it melds together, it falls together very very nicely, and as I said, has aged very well.
And My Brave Face, I mean, not only the lead single, but the opening track. I mean, that song to me, I just love that song. I mean, it's got everything about it, musically, lyrically. I think the Costello McCartney combination there really works out well. And it's just, I think, a great song, and I love the video that came out, partly because all the little Beatles memorabilia things in it. I think at the time, people might have thought, okay, this is one of the things that he frequently did, especially after this. This might have been one of the first, but it's reminding everybody that. Yes, the Beatles, that was me, but nevertheless, I mean, I thought it was cool bringing all that memorabilia out of his, safe and having it filmed and having also a little narrative. There's a little narrative going on there of this Japanese collector trying to get his hands on the stuff. And, I thought it was kind of cool. But the song was just great. The song was...
Oh, yeah. And in fact, if I forgot to look it up, but I believe it actually charted higher than any of the 3 singles that were on Press to Play.
Well, that's not surprising because they were, not as good.
Yeah.
So when do I insert my opinion here?
Yes, please.
Well, I have no problem at all with you praising Flowers in the Dirt because I've said it's my favorite McCartney album now, because McCartney always represents variety in his music and strong melodies and very often strong lyrics, not always. This album has all of that, and especially I love the lyrics when Paul and Elvis write together. Very odd lyrics, but very strong lyrics. And sometimes there's a lot of dark lyrics, too, like That Day Is Done. There's such a rich variety on Flowers in the Dirt. But the only problem that I have, and I think that for anyone who might be a new listener to this show, in case they're questioning about this concept of aging well, I have a huge problem with anyone saying that certain music has aged well and certain music hasn't. Because as far as I'm concerned, and I've defended Press to Play, I don't mind the 80s sound. And I don't mind all the drum machines and the synthesizers and whatever they used in the 80s. I think it worked very well on Press to Play for the kind of sound that Paul was striving for then. And when people say that was the sound of the time, which Paul said, actually, in a recent interview, he said that he was going for the flavor of the month. Well, throughout the 80s on up, he's been working with various producers who happen to be hot producers of the time. So if you go back to even something like the new album, he's got Mark Ronson on there, who's one of the hottest producers of the time. He's working with Adele's producer now. So he's doing the same kind of work, working with producers that he admires from current music of the time that he likes. He should be proud of that.
But my point is that Flowers in the Dirt doesn't have that very much of its time sound to it. It has a much more timeless feel to it. It doesn't feel like an 80s album.
But even if something came out in the 80s, I don't just say it's 80s. I like it now.
But there are some things that sound 80s, and there are some things that don't. That just sound, as Al says, timeless.
Yeah, I don't think you can take an album and criticize the hasn't aged well idea just across the board and say it's not valid. I think it is valid under certain circumstances. Not with this album. I agree, and to kind of get it. I think, Al, I might have picked up on what you had written kind of about my feeling about the album, but it seemed to me that for a long time Flowers got a bad feeling, although I will say that it was the first album during which I saw McCartney, because I saw him on that tour, and that made a difference, seeing them do it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several of the songs on there benefited. Figure of Eight is probably the greatest example of a song that benefited from its live performance, especially since that was the last time that Paul began a concert tour with, as its opener, a song other than a Beatles song. Mm-hmm. In other words, beginning with the '93 tour, he, as always, ever since then, he's opened his show with a Beatles song.
And those shows. I mean, I saw the show in Berkeley. It was not either 90. I think it was 90 or 91. I can't remember what year now. 90. But that was a great. I have it somewhere, and I don't remember what. But it was a great show. It was a really great show.
And there's a soundboard bootleg of it around.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
I think I don't know if we've discussed it on the air, on the air, but we have talked about it on the air, and it's a great quality. And that actually kind of leads to something I was going to say a little later, which I'll hold off saying now. But
right, well, I'll tell you what. Let me just, because I interrupted Ken.
Oh, okay.
So let me just let him complete his thought.
All right.
Just the simple fact that when I hear the songs from Press to Play, I don't just say to myself, oh, that's the 80s. It sounds like a good song now to me. And there are a lot of songs right now that use some of the same kind of production. So I don't just think that it's dated. And I don't even think if a song sounds dated, there's anything that bad with it. I mean, when I listen to early Beatles music, when I listen to She Loves You, I know that wasn't recorded today, and I know that there's nothing that's out today that sounds anything like it. But that doesn't make me think less of it. So this whole idea of what's aged well, I don't process that at all. You can tell. I remember we had a conversation like this many shows back, and you were saying certain things like Band on the Run sounds contemporary. Well, if Band on the Run never came out in 1973, and it came out today, and it sounded exactly like that, I could tell you that was produced in the 70s.
Well, obviously there are technical aspects of it that are from the 70s, but especially in the case of Band on the Run, because of the fact that it was, there were only the three people and plus a few, some session musicians involved. There's not a lot of production going on. Let's put it that way.
I'm talking in terms of production and also songwriting. I don't hear anything that's out there today that sounds like Band on the Run. So you know that it's from another time, but I don't think any less of it for that. The same way I don't think any less of Press to Play.
Right, but you have a much more liberal viewpoint than I think maybe either the rest of us do or a lot of other people do.
Well, thank you, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Al may also be having a sort of a different approach to aging well, which is that he hated Flowers in the Dirt when it came out, and now he thinks it's really pretty good. So it's aged well in that way, whereas Press to Play wasn't very good when it came out, and it isn't very good now.
Actually,
I don't agree with that.
I know you
actually, I liked Press to Play a lot more back then, and then when we did a show on it relatively recently, and I listened to it in context for the first time in quite a while, and heard those tracks that sound like Phil Collins should be singing them instead of Paul.
Why do you say that? Paul has the same right to do those same kind of songs.
Okay.
It's fine.
Only Love Remains is great, but
yes.
Are we getting sidetracked onto it?
Yes, we are.
Getting sidetracked.
Right, you were talking. Yeah, you were going to be talking about Flowers in the Dirt.
Well, Flowers in the Dirt, like I said, is a very strong album from start to finish. I love every single aspect of it. You know, most McCartney albums, even the ones that I would rate a 10 out of 10, might have something slightly wrong with it. You know, there are certain McCartney albums where I think certain songs go on too long. Mm-hmm. And actually, in the case of Flowers in the Dirt, I would say that about Motor of Love, which I think goes on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
But still, all the songs, there's such variety. I mean, when I first listened to Flowers in the Dirt when it first came out, My Brave Face hit me right in the head. This one, you know, those songs, you know, I instantly liked. And then other songs grew on me. And the one song I just couldn't grasp was Don't Be Careless, Love.
Really?
And after a while, I couldn't get that song out of my head. You know, it's a very quirky song, and there's nothing else that I've heard Paul do that sounds like that. And obviously a lot of that is Elvis Costello's songwriting influence in that too. But there's so many different styles of music on this album. We Got Married, I think, was brilliant. Distractions is really nice. I mean, kind of similar in a way to Footprints. It has a sort of a jazz overtones. You know, probably some very odd chords going on in Distractions as well. You know, a lot of unique sounds. And I do love a dance track like Où Le Soleil. I think it's a good, fun track. You know, I like all the different sounds. I'm sorry. I happen to like dance tracks. Maybe I don't... We'll
Mr.
talk about,
Disco.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Maybe Mr. Diverse is more like it. So I like every song on Flowers in the Dirt, and I do. It's my favorite album of his. There you go.
You know, at the time it came out, and My Brave Face came out as a single with Flying to My Home on the back. I thought Flying to My Home was an incredible track. I mean, it's just beautiful. And I could not understand why you would not put that on the album, but would put Où Le Soleil on the album, and even some of the others, Rough Ride, you know, whatever. And so I asked him. And when I interviewed him like a year later, when Trippin' the Live Fantastic came out, I said, I don't really understand how this works. I mean, you've got an incredible track like that. That's better than some of the tracks on the album. I don't think I singled out Où Le Soleil because I didn't want to, you know. But you know, why does that happen? And he said, well, you know, I write them all, you know, so I like them all, and I don't really know how to judge, you know, which ones are best. So I play them for my kids and their friends, and I sort of go with what they seem to like. Which I thought was kind of, you know, weird, but, you know, you're supposed to either have some sort of editorial overview, or this, as I think Lawrence Juber said last week when we talked to him, this is why someone has a producer. You know, the producer is supposed to say, no, this one, not that one, you know, this one.
But he had several producers on Flowers.
Yeah, but you need an overall producer who will. Well, I mean, actually, the producers he was using might have liked Où Le Soleil for all I know, and maybe didn't like Flying to My Home. But you know,
yeah, that article that you were referring to before, where you heard from all the producers from Flowers in the Dirt, it was Steve Lipson, who was working with Trevor Horn, who I believe said that he thought Rough Ride would have made the best single better than My Brave Face. So that's what one other producer or engineer, that was his opinion. So, you know, you obviously wouldn't agree with that.
Absolutely not.
Everybody has their own opinion. And I know Paul has said, because we've talked about this before, sometimes he goes to his kids and he asks them what they think of his music. So maybe he takes their advice as well.
Yeah.
It's possible.
It's what he says.
Yeah. I do not think this is the be-all, end-all album that Ken does, but I do think it has definitely grown in my estimation since it came out. Maybe I took it for a little too much for granted back then, but in listening to it all again, I was caught up by it. And I am not people who know me know I'm not a McCartney cheerleader. Not that I'm saying any of us are. But I am not, and I do like this album an awful lot. I think it's very strong. I don't think every track is perfect.
What don't you think is perfect?
What don't I think is perfect?
Yeah.
How Many People is not, it just doesn't seem to fit in for me. I don't particularly like like that.
No, but specifically, what don't you like about it not fitting in? You like reggae, right?
No, not there. I don't think it fits in there. Reggae is fine, except I don't think it fits in on the album very well with the mood of the rest of the album. I just don't think it works that well.
Except that, as Ken said, there are so many musical genres represented on this album.
Well, I agree.
Reggae was just one of them.
Right. For me, though, it just How Many People just doesn't seem to work that well. But I mean, I like the others, and listening to the album again brought back memories. Number one, of seeing him do some of this stuff live, and also just My Brave Face has always been one of these songs that I've always loved. That has never been in question. That's one of my all-time favorite McCartney songs, probably because of the Beatles thing that that seems to be happening there. I love that song a lot. Rough Ride also. I probably grew to like that after I heard them do it in Berkeley. Distractions is good. I remember he did We Got Married that night in Berkeley also, and I like that. Figure of Eight was one of the best songs he did live that night. If I'm referring to the live thing, I just enjoyed that show an awful lot.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think that and the same thing happened with Venus and Mars. The live versions of songs from that album that Paul did on the 75 and 76 tours definitely kind of upgraded those songs in the estimation of a lot of people.
Oh, right. And I actually think that the live versions of this album did more for this album than the ones from Venus and Mars. I think. I don't know. Maybe you guys want. I don't know if you want to argue that, but I do because but they're great songs in themselves, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm detracting from the album at all. This is there's no question. This is a great album. There's no question about it.
It's the kind of stuff that where you would have figured that if he were to put out just theoretically a 4-disc set of his best favorite stuff, that some of these songs would be on it, right?
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Cousin. Yes, absolutely. I wonder why he didn't do that.
There are at least 3 or 4 songs on here that probably would have belonged on an album. Say an album that he could have called, I don't know, Pure McCartney.
That probably would have sold a lot more had he done that.
Well, maybe he could have a download-only 5th disc with.
This is true. With just those 4 songs.
There we go.
But going back to an idea that you just brought up, Al, and I do agree, and Steve and I talked about this when it was just him and me doing the show, but I would go even further and say that during the Wings Over America tour, the songs from Band on the Run, Venus and Mars and Wings at the Speed of Sound, many of them translated better live than in the studio. I always loved the studio versions too. And certainly in the case of Flowers in the Dirt, Figure of Eight is much better as a live song.
I think so too.
Massively better.
It loses its guts in the studio version to the point where the Bob Clearmountain mix, the 12-inch mix, is so much better than the one that's on the album.
Yeah, so absolutely, and the video, which is included on the DVD, which was I think put out because of the fact that the song had gotten such positive reaction along the tour. It was really almost made to seem as if it was a live recording, even though it was the studio recording.
Right.
And I remember one of the memories, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on the air before, but I do remember saying it to you guys. One of my memories of seeing Paul in Berkeley was during Figure of Eight, hearing Linda yell "Yeah" near the end of the song, and that version, the whole recording, the whole concert is floating around out there in a great soundboard version, and you can hear Linda clear as a bell saying that. And I remember we were sitting way at the back of Berkeley Memorial Stadium, and you couldn't miss it. You couldn't miss it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I remember seeing Hamish Stewart and Robbie McIntosh appear at the Chicago Beatle Fest in, I think it may have been maybe like 99, somewhere in that neighborhood, and they did and they came on stage and played with Liverpool, and Mitch Wiseman at that point was a member of Liverpool, and so of course was doing all of Paul's songs, and they did Figure of Eight, and I swear I got chills. It was really a magic moment, and it worked very, very well. Yeah.
I remember Hamish appearing at Beatlefest. I don't remember him doing that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, well, Hamish did one by himself, but this was Hamish and Robbie.
Okay.
In fact, actually, I think, if I recall, I think Hamish appeared very, very briefly there, just on Sunday afternoon. Or early Sunday evening, and played with Liverpool.
He did Los Angeles. I can't remember if Robbie did Los Angeles too. I remember because I remember attending the one with Hamish in Los Angeles, but I don't remember that Robbie was there. He may have been, but I don't recall it.
Very possible.
Right.
Very possible.
Right.
It'd be nice to bring them back.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with Flowers of the Dirt coming out like this, and Chris Whitten for that matter.
There's a thought, Mr. Sussman.
Well, we've talked about that, and because really, especially at this, in fact, I think we talked about it on the Fest wrap-up show, that with having 4 members of Wings at the New York Fest, the only living, other than Paul, obviously, the only other living members of Wings who have not appeared at a fest are, in fact, Chris Whitten and Jeff Britton.
No, Chris Whitten was not in Wings. You're thinking of Joey.
I'm sorry, not Wings, but Paul's what I call it, the Hamish Robbie band.
Okay.
Right. He's the only one. Yeah, actually, I think there are also a couple of Wicks, obviously, and Blair Cunningham.
Right.
Have never done a fest also.
Wicks would be amazing, considering all the years that he's worked with Paul now.
Yeah.
So.
I would think that that's not going to happen while he's still working with him.
Probably not. Probably not, and the same obviously for the the members of Paul's current band.
Right. What's Whitten and Cunningham doing now? Do you know?
No idea.
Yeah, I haven't. I don't think we've heard too much from either of them.
Yeah.
We'll go look online.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Anyway,
so moving back to to Flowers in the Dirt, does anybody else have anything about the album itself before we move on to the other discs?
Well, I was wondering what you all thought of the new remaster, because I listened to it and I didn't hear that big a difference.
No.
A little bit more high end, a little bit more percussion and drums. There seemed to be a little hotter in the mix, especially on something like Rough Ride. I didn't hear that big a difference sonically.
It wasn't huge, but it sounded a bit brighter to me, and I didn't do a lot of A-Bing, but I compared a few tracks to the previous issue, not to the very first, but the last reissue, and it did sound a bit better, generally speaking. So I didn't continue A-Bing because I felt satisfied that this was the one I was going to keep in the playlist, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do wonder how much you can improve some of these recordings that were at the time. How many multi-track was this album? You know, they had advanced technology then.
Yeah,
it's much more advanced now, but I mean, it sounded great when it first came out. You can only improve it so much.
You could probably improve it possibly by remixing, but you know that opens up other kettles of fish. So since it's not a remix, I think it's possibly as good as you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. You know, and especially since the times span is not as great as it is with, say, the 70s albums.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone the Beatles albums.
And by the way, the downloads of, you get with the box set, you can download the whole thing free as tracks. Obviously you need it for the disc with the B-sides anyway and the cassette demos, but I can't see any reason not to download the whole thing. But it also comes as WAV files in, I think, 2496 or 4896. So they're really sort of high quality files, higher quality than you're getting on the CD actually.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's another reason to pay if you can do it, pay the extra, Yeah. So.
All right. Right now we are at the halfway point in our analysis of Flowers in the Dirt, the new remastered box set. And we're going to resume more conversation about the box set in our next show, discussing the DVD, the demos of Paul and Elvis. That'll all be in the next show. So before we go, let's give everyone our contact information. First with you, Steve.
Well, the show you can get a hold of at thingswesaiddtoday@gmail.com. You can email me at BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com, and I'm on Facebook.
And as for me, Ken Michaels, you can reach me at my email address at everylittlething@att.net. Don't forget to take a look at my website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com. I just want to mention very briefly that I have a contest going on for those of you on the East Coast to win tickets to see Denny Lane in concert at Daryl's Place, which is in Pawling, New York. And this particular concert is kind of special because the last few years, he and his band have been performing Band on the Run in their entirety. He's not only doing that album, he's doing the entire first Booty Blues album to go along with it. So if you want to win a pair of tickets, I have 3 pairs of tickets to give away on my website at the Tickets Giveaways page. And don't forget that you can win Flowers in the Dirt, the special edition, on CD or vinyl on my website as well. All right, so be sure to join us next week for part 2 of Flowers in the Dirt, the remaster. And for Steve Marinucci, Al Sussman, and Ellen Kozin, I'm Ken Michaels, thanking you for joining us, and we will see you next time.